Brother John Phelps coming in today on January 4th, 2024 with our third and last broadcast concerning the Jews' right to Gaza of Judah, part 3 of 3. Brother John Phelps, 24/7 World Radio. Thank you for tuning in, and I trust this third section will be somewhat illustrative as we tie this together. I'm going to show you how the leaders of Israel work in conjunction with the leaders of Hamas, and that both are controlled by the Jesuit order to carry out policies that will further the designs of the Jesuit papacy and the Vatican there in the Middle East. And that design, two of those designs are the reestablishment of the Sunni Caliphate and the securing of the revived Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, namely Israel, and the destruction of the Muslim buildings on the Temple Mount, one's a mosque and the other's Dome of the Rock, so that the third temple can be rebuilt or be built. Meanwhile, many Jews and many Arabs must die, pursuant to the wishes of Satan in killing those two most important of races, as I discussed previously in my 2 of 3 presentations here. So now we're going to start with the attack of, well, first of all, we're going to start with the giving of Gaza by Ariel Sharon to the Muslims back during his reign as prime minister. I regard Barry Chamish as the foremost authority on the history of Israel for the last 50 years. He presently is not with us. He passed away several years ago, along with his good friend and my good friend, Joel Boehnerman. But these two gentlemen authored a series of magazines called Inside Israel, and you can find many, many good things that they wrote and that are relevant for today. Barry Chamish has a book titled Shabtai Zev, Labor Zionism and the Holocaust, where he shows that these certain Jews, he calls them Sabbateans, I call them Masonic Jews, worked in conjunction with the Nazis to carry out the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust. But he makes a comment here on page 12 of his book, Shabtai Zev, Labor Zionism and the Holocaust, by Barry Chamish. He says, there is a little think tank in Manhattan called the Council on Foreign Relations. The 3,800 members are as powerful in America as the Bilderbergers are in Europe. The Bronfman brothers are intimately tied to the CFR, and Brother Edgar is an executive member of the cabal. Lately, some CFR members, known as neocons, have been attacked directly by other CFR members like Anthony Zini. Anthony Zini was the general of the U.S. Marines. He was also a Knight of Malta. And are indirectly by the likes of John Kerry. John Kerry is Skull and Bones. Incredibly, because they are causing blood to gush in Iraq and claim they are fighting Islamic terror. Israelis and Jews think the neocons are their allies. They cannot understand a very simple and clear fact. It is the neocons who are behind, quote, the roadmap, unquote. And it is the neocons like Wolfowitz, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Pearl, Pipes, every one of them but Rumsfeld, CFR members, who are forcing Sharon to pull out of Gaza, even if it requires murdering Jews to make a point. They want for Israel what they've got for Iraq, even foreign troops. Sharon's disengagement plan calls for foreign troops taking over lands evacuated by Gaza's Jews. Allow me to quote June 3rd article of the Jerusalem Post. And so he quotes it. But Barry Chamish is very good when he brings in the fact of the CFR and these notorious Jews having high places of influence. We see on page 114, again he mentions the CFR. He says, it fits well with the material in your email. It reveals that at least 2 editions of the American version of Mein Kampf were Council on Foreign Relations members. 2 editors of the American version of Mein Kampf were Council on Foreign Relations editors. There were also OSS operatives. OSS later became the CIA. OSS was led by Wild Bill Donovan, an Irish Catholic who was also a member of the Knights of Malta. One of the editors, George S. Schuster, was closely connected with the church. Of course, that's the papacy. The article doesn't go into the connection. Among other things, he was editor of a Catholic publication called Commonweal. Many CFR members are connected to Georgetown University. It is a Jesuit university in Washington, D.C. Clinton graduated from Georgetown. One of his Georgetown University professors was Carroll Quigley, author of Tragedy and Hope. That's right, where the Jesuits are only mentioned one time in that 1,000-page tome. So the Council on Foreign Relations is the big political think tank and directorate for the Jesuits, is what they're going to do with their foreign policies. And they have the most brilliant minds in the world working there. The CFR was created in 1921 here in America, and it was the Archbishop of New York who facilitated it. So the Archbishop of New York City oversees what takes place at the CFR. And when you have CFR influence in Israel, the leaders of Israel are doing the bidding of the Roman papacy as decided upon at the Council on Foreign Relations. There are pictures of Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat at the Council on Foreign Relations. And these agents of the papacy were Clinton and Shimon Peres, not Shimon Peres, but Clinton and the one that was assassinated in Israel. They're together with Bill Clinton. And that's Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon and Yasser Arafat there with the supposed peace overseen by Jesuit-educated Bill Clinton. They're all players. They don't represent anything except they do the bidding of the Jesuits running the papacy. So, Barry Chamish once told me that Yasser Arafat and Shimon Peres had stocks in the same telephone company in Israel, Paltel. Now, how do you explain that? Unless they're working together. So, they're working together. The leaders of Hamas and the leaders of the nation of Israel working together. Now, it's clear that Benjamin Netanyahu works for the papacy. He's a high-level Freemason, and he doesn't care about the Jews of Israel. He only cares for the state of Israel staying in place, and so therefore he will sacrifice Jews to maintain that. It's also the case of the leaders of Hamas to sacrifice their own Arab people, deluding them into thinking they're fighting Israel, when in fact they are creating sympathy for Israel and strengthening the will of the Jews in Israel to fight them. So they're working simultaneously for the destruction of racial Jews, racial Arabs, and for ultimately the benefit of the revived Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, and ultimately for the benefit of the establishment of the second Sunni Caliphate, which they intend to establish. So we have the Battle of Lepanto, which was October 7th, 1571. It's considered the second most important sea battle in world history. That's where the Knights of Malta, those merchants and seafarers, went to war with the Muslim navy and defeated it. Well, I find it intriguing that this happened on October 7th, 1571, and the invasion of the Arabs, I don't call them Palestinians, invasion of the Arab Muslims into Gaza happened on October 7th, 2023. What for? Why didn't they attack October 8th, or the 6th, or the 9th? Why the 7th? Because it's remembering Lepanto. We're going to get even for our loss against the Catholic forces at Lepanto. Or maybe it goes deeper than that. Maybe we're attacking on October 7th, anticipating our future defeat as we Muslims were defeated at Lepanto on October 7th, 1571. Either way, they chose October 7th to attack. October 7th is when the U.S. invaded Iraq. October 7th. So, we have to realize it's a very important date. We're going on here now, so what happens is we have this large Muslim invasion into Gaza, and Israel had what was called the Iron Wall, separating Israel from the Muslims living in the Gaza Strip, which they erroneously call Palestine. There just happened to be 15 openings in the Iron Dome, in the Iron Wall, I should say. How is that? And the other fact that is irrefutable is the Israeli army was not ordered to intervene and stop the mass murder for a little over 7 hours. Why? Is it because the Pope's Israeli leaders wanted to create mass sympathy for what would be done to Gaza after that? Create mass sympathy for the Jews in Israel to then countenance what's being done in Gaza now? So I think that is the case. I think it's justified a genocide in the eyes of most Israelis, in the eyes of most American Jews. Well, remember, both sides are controlled by the papacy, and remember, the devil hates Arabs almost as much as he hates the Jews because of their racial identity and the promises they have in Isaiah 19. So, here's a possible solution to the issue. Number one, Gaza should have never been given to the Muslim Arabs and made it separate from Israel. It was a sin and a crime to do that. And Barry Chambers says in his work, Bye Bye Gaza, that the CFR was behind this. The Council on Foreign Relations was behind giving Gaza away. I read from his book, Bye Bye Gaza by Barry Chambers, Slowly Bringing Down Gaza. And this was published in 2006. About the time Sharon gives Gaza to the Muslims. We see chapter 1, page 5. The last holdout of Jewish morality, our religion, has been taken over by the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR. The CFR is run by the Archbishop of New York City. That's why John Paul II called the Archbishop of New York the Archbishop of the political capital of the world, and you can read that in a book called John Cardinal Connor, which is the story of the Archbishop of New York City when he was Archbishop then. Written by a Jew, Nate Henhoff, by the way. Interesting. Written by one of the Pope's court Jews on praising the Archbishop of New York. The two leading New York rabbinical colleges, Yeshiva University and the Jewish Theological Seminary, are now in the hands of the worst enemies of Judaism, indeed of mankind. Well, that's the CFR, controlled by the Pope. In the future, the majority of America's rabbis will be thoroughly inculcated in the globalist vision of the New World Order, Sabbateans. The Sabbateans are named after Shabtai Zev. He also calls them Sabbatean Frankists. And these Jews were, at the time, in the 1600s, busy doing the bidding of the papacies, especially the Frankists. All the Frankists were baptized in the Roman Catholic Church, and the King of Poland was their sponsor in the 1700s thereabouts. These Jews, Masonic today, are agents for the Jesuit order running the papacy and the Council on Foreign Relations. And this dreadful vision has already spread to Jerusalem. He goes on to state in Gaza, page 120, in his book on Gaza, Offer Gaza. And he says here, the American Army base, page 120, as reported in my last memo, a huge American army base is nearing completion in Israel. Reportedly, it has holding facilities for as many as 18,000 protesters. After visiting it yesterday, I'd say way more. This base is massive. I counted 10 enormous U.S. Army-issue prefab warehouses, and more were going up. At the base guard post, the American flag is waving in the wind. A sign proclaims that the project manager is one Jerry Ray. I start taking photos of the base with a cheap camera. The guard asked what I was doing. I replied, I'm a journalist, proving that a huge American military base is being constructed on Israeli soil. What's wrong with that? He asked. Who else would protect us from the Palestinians? Where are the Americans? I probed. What do you mean? They're everywhere here. Everyone in charge is American. We drove away. My friend at the wheel was even more depressed than me. It's a concentration camp, he said. That's right. So they're anticipating a huge war, anticipating roundups, anticipating sending them to concentration camps. And I would imagine there will be Jews going there. There will be Muslims going there. Remember, so they want to kill Jews, they want to kill Arabs. They control both sides. They control Netanyahu, and on the Hamas side, they control a man named Ismail Haniyeh. Ismail Haniyeh. This man was very important and very high up in Hamas. He is, 61 now? And he lives in Qatar. The moment you think Qatar, you need to think of a huge Jesuit university in Qatar. And it is enormous and highly costly. The Jesuits run Qatar. And this man, Ismail Haniyeh, has an estimated 2.5 billion American dollars. He's rich. He's educated, I'm sure, in Catholic schools. I'm sure he's overseen by the Jesuits at Qatar. And I'm sure this guy right here, Ismail Haniyeh, secretly, in some way, works with Benjamin Netanyahu. Secretly lives in Benjamin Netanyahu, and he left Gaza in 2023, right before the attack began. So, the Israeli intelligence knew all about the attack. IDF leaders knew all about the attack. Hamas, of course, orchestrated it, so they knew all about the attack. If Mossad knew all about the attack, well, then the CIA knew all about the attack. This is all choreographed with Jesuit authors making sure that they control the outcome of this. They control the thesis, the Muslim attack, the antithesis, the Israeli response after 7 hours of letting those savages mass murder those innocent people, and then the outcome, the desolation of the Arabs in Gaza, many of whom are women and children, unfortunately, but that's just the cost of war. Now, how could you resolve this? What would you do to resolve this agitation? Well, the first thing I would do is I would tell Egypt, you are going to take these Arabs. I'm not calling them Palestinians. There's no such country as Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestinian Authority. You're going to take all these Muslim Arabs into Egypt. You're going to take them. And that would free up the land of Gaza to go back to Jewish rule and occupation, where they can have some sort of civilization, where they can stop using, where the Muslims will not use Gaza as a staging base to launch rockets into Israel. Go to the source of the problem. It's Muslims in Gaza. Send them south to Egypt, or send them east to Jordan. Jordan is Palestine. Send them there, or send them up to Lebanon, where they can unite with Hezbollah. But get them out of the country. Instead, they're going to be killed out. And this is going to create all kinds of anti-Jewish, anti-American fury in the Muslim world. And that's exactly what the Jesuits want. They're going to create this fury. They're going to bring them over here. We got Muslims coming across the border in the south by the hundreds of thousands. And they show up in New York protesting the war in Gaza. How did they get here? They came through the south, through the border that Biden has open. The Jesuit-controlled Biden has open. And so now they bring them in here, and so they can agitate against the Jews here. Because one of the purposes for this war is to create anti-Jewish fury in America to drive them out or to kill them out. And remember, if we're going to a new right, of which I've taught for years, the right in Germany was friends with the Muslims. Hitler was friends with Hajj al-Husseini, Mufti of Jerusalem. They worked together. And so could it be when the new right comes to power here, they will work in conjunction with the Muslims for the killing of Jews? Because the Jews are going to be a big target when the new right comes to power. They're going to blame the Jews for everything. Why, it's in Colorado, those Jews running that state that want to take Trump off the ballot. And the same way in Maine. They got to have upfront Jews doing these horrible, terrible, unlawful, evil things to ultimately unite the people, particularly the white people, to go against them, and you'll have the Muslims to help them. That's a pot. Remember, the Jesuits have many strings to their bow. All that matters is you know who they control and the end game that they want. And they want the end of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Reformation. They want the end of the white Protestant race in the United States and Canada. They want a race mixed and miscegenated into a Brazil or a Cuba, where it can be easily governed by white men busy serving the Pope. As I've always taught, the best men in the world are white, and the most wicked men in the world are white. Yep. So in conclusion, the Jesuits run both sides. They run Hamas, they run the Labor Zionists or Likud, or whatever you want to call them, in Israel. Anybody that gets out of order, they will kill. Like that one Saudi Arabian guy that the prince of Saudi Arabia had him killed in Turkey because he was going against Israel, and Saudi Arabia is doing pro-Israel things and uniting its intelligence group with the Israeli intelligence. So that guy was killed by order of the king several years ago. Yitzhak Rabin was murdered by Shin Bet. It wasn't killed by some lone assassin. Barry Chambers proves it in his work on the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. What we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is the Pope's international intelligence community controlling all the political offices and candidates, controlling the elections so that no one can ever be elected that will really represent the desires of the people that they supposedly serve, to the end that all these peoples will be reduced to the political, dictatorial, absolutist power of the Pope of Rome. And that's what they want. One more fact. The only ones able to resist this are white men who are saved. They are in Christ. They're indwelt by the Spirit of God, sealed to the day of redemption. The Reformation Bible is their final authority of faith and practice. And in answer to their prayers, God sends them leaders that will lead them to be truly patriotic and nationalistic, to have their country, rule their country for the benefit of themselves. And that's true nationalism. Nationalism is the formula how nations need to live, noted by race, language, culture with a definite geographic boundary. And the Jesuits are against all that. They want to mix the languages, mix the races, do away with the boundaries, all of that confusion to justify absolutism and AI robots policing everywhere. So in conclusion, now you know what's behind the whole Hamas invasion. Now you know how to pray, that God would raise up leaders in response to our repentance, our genuine sorrows for our personal sins, our confession of sin to the Lord, forsaking of sin, and then ultimately seeking to do His will as we read His Word on a regular basis, and that He will intervene for us and possibly give us more time here in North America. And He can do it. The question is, will we repent? Will we seek the Lord and to do His will? So this is the last and final volume of our series of 3 on the Jews' right to Gaza of Judea. I trust you find this a blessing, and especially you, my dear sister, who sent me your letter and a gift, Sister Shoal. May the Lord bless you as you do His will according to His word. The AV 1611 Reformation English Bible. Again, send your gifts to on Zelle at Eric, E-R-I-C, John, Jon, P-H-E-L-P-S, at 484-238-5200. So until next time we meet, Lord bless. Maranatha.